Hello everyone, Vovashkona here, and today in the book club we're gonna talk about one of the masterpieces of French literature, Germinal by Emile Zola. Alright, first of all, I hope those who are aware of this book will get the reference why today the background color is red. Funny enough, the red color really associates politically with the Communist Party, and well, Germinal is really influenced by the ultra left parties, like really Labour Party or something like this. So these are the early years of communism, and its influence is seen spread also, of course, in the Western Europe where it started, because now I think it's really fully associated with USSR. And it's been antagonizing as the political ideology for a really long time. Okay, first of all, the book may sound a bit like it's quite full of politics in it, right? It is, but it isn't. So the book is really about the life of coal miners in the north of France, so not too far from Lille, and basically it starts off with the main character, I would say, one of the main characters of the whole book, Etienne, who was recently sacked from his job. He was a mechanic at one of the factories in Lille, and then he still had a mother, but in order to find life for himself somewhere, because he was unemployed and he was really troublesome for him to find a new position, he decided to just walk all the way to the south, and while walking there, he stumbled upon the small coal miners' village, let's put it this way, where he basically went to the coal mine. It was quite freezing, it was winter at that point of a time, and he then decided to stick around and start working on the mine. Then, of course, the story tells pretty much about the family of Maheu, and Maheu, this is the dynasty of coal miners. So, first of all, Etienne meets the first of the Maheu, who is they also call him Immortal, I believe. And he is basically the oldest member of the family. He still works in the mine, and he, 1 or 2 years until his retirement, when he finally will be getting money for all these years he needed to suffer beneath the earth to get all the coal. And now he's also, of course, having terrible health conditions, and the life of coal miners is not that easy. And the whole family of Maheu is like that. So there is the father of the family. I don't really remember if his name was ever mentioned. Usually in the book he was referred to as just Maheu, and his wife was usually referred to as Maheu's wife. They're also having a lot of kids, I think 7 kids. There was Zachary, who was the oldest one, who already he already has had his own kids. There was also Catherine, there was also Jeanne. There were 2 smaller kids, names of whose I don't really remember, but they didn't work, so only Zachary, Maheu, Catherine, and Jeanne worked still at the mine, plus, of course, the Immortal. The wife of Maheu needed to stay with kids. One was just still a toddler. Another one, she was just 8, but she was really helping out her mother with the household things, because she was a hunchback, so that is why she needed to. She couldn't really help anywhere in the mine. Plus, she was also not yet at the age to even be able to go and do something there. And there were also 2 smaller kids. I don't really remember their names. I think the name of the hunchback girl was Alzira or something like this. It was quite an interesting name. They were living close to the town Montsou, which was the nearest town where most of the interesting entertainment stuff was happening. Most of the markets are opening there, and of course their own village where they all live didn't really have the name. It was just called Coal Miner Village number 240, something like this. Zola was so great at describing the miserable life they were having. They were living in such a terrible poverty. It was sometimes agonizing to read how he mixing up the terrible poverty that most of the inhabitants of the village 240 needed to deal with on a daily basis with the life of Grégoires, for example, or the life of the director of the mine, who was also living and staying, Monsieur Enbo, and his wife, and his nephew, who was also working as engineer in the mine. So they were definitely living their best life, and they were having quite a bank. And besides that, there was also Monsieur de Nalen, who was also having his two daughters, and they were all being preoccupied with their higher class problems, while miners' family, most of them needed to first think of the way of how they wouldn't starve this week, while Denelin, for example, was just considering of, oh my god, my mine will go bankrupt. How is it possible? I should have sold it, or I shouldn't sold it. And that's one of the main conflicts between him and the mine company. Was owing the mine where Etienne and Maheu were working. So Etienne got to know the whole family of Maheu once he joined their artel in the mine, and that's where he first met Catherine. There was sort of a spark between them from the very first day, but it turned out that she was already kind of semi-dating Chaval, who is probably the most disgusting character of the whole book. Him and Megara, who was the owner of the shop in the village, were two probably most disgusting men in the whole book. So Chaval, he was young, bold, and stupid in terms of his decision. He was really the traitor when certain events started to happen, and Megara, he was just a disgusting man who was using his position to be one of the wealthiest out of all inhabitants of the village, and he used this position to have sex with almost every woman who would come to ask for a favor, to lend her some bread for her to feed her family, or otherwise they will just die from starving. So Etienne was friends with Pluchart, who was one of the leaders of International, basically the new movement that was going for the rights of the workers and technically against the capitalists. So he was really influenced by his ideas, and he also came to Montsou, where he also found... So there were other people who also shared his position, who were also educated well enough in order to have some political debate with Etienne, whom also at first wasn't really educated, but then he was reading more and more books and started to prepare himself for a more political role. So there was also Rasner, who was the owner of the local bar, and there was Souvarin, who was the Russian anarchist who needed to flee from Russia at that point of time, and he found his place in France, where his anarchist ideas were still growing there, and he was still believing that they would be able to get rid of the government. That was his position. So all three men, they were having different opinion about how the government should be restructured, while Souvarin, as I already mentioned, he really felt like anarchy is the only way, so they need to first get rid of everything, and the whole current capitalist machine that is working on. They first need to get rid of anything in order to build something new, and that the workers and the just normal people, poor people, will not be poor anymore, and they will be just living their normal lives, and by this they will make a better society. But first it probably may require some blood to be shed and some people to be killed, and some capitalists to be eradicated. While Rasner, he was more of a mild, more of a liberal in this sort of sense. He was still indeed with workers, and back in the days he was able to make a fortune after working on the mine, but then he sued the company, and out of this he got the money, so he was able to open a bar, and now his business is going on. So he was one of the also oppositions against the company, against the capitalism in this sort of sense, but his ideas were much more mild, and he believed that with extreme ideas nothing will work out, and only a dialogue, the protest, no violent protest needs to happen. So Etienne was sort of hearing both sides and was always sometimes more in between. He definitely didn't, sometimes he leaned towards more of a sovereign opinion than more towards the Rasners. But at the end of the day, he was the one who decided to go all in and started the whole movement. So first they were collecting the money, and they were collecting it for, I don't know, I think about half a year. They were collecting the money in order to have the special reserve when, in the case they would need to, I don't know, protest against mine company, they would just use this money in order to survive. So they were collecting the money, but at some point in time, the whole sequence of the events got triggered, because the company at the end decided to put the rules that now they will pay less for each of the wagonette of coal, but they will start paying a small amount of money for miners to fix the tunnels, so it will become more safe to work in them, because before they weren't motivated to do that, and most of them just perceived it as a waste of time. That's why they were working in really extremely unsafe conditions, thus more injuries and accidents were happening in the mine. So by trying to stimulate them to fix this, they've cut the price per wagonette by too much. So that's what triggered the whole sequence of events when Etienne pronounced that now they are stopping working in the mines, and they are asking all the local mines surrounding them to join in this protest. So that's what happened, and it lasted for several months. First people had all the money, but then I think after 1 month it was all gone. People were really starving, the conditions were terrible, people were still always with Etienne at most of the times. Then even Plachard went here and provided some help from the community, from other workers from like England. They were also having similar protests. That is why they also found it quite important for them to help their French colleagues. It all started off quite optimistically for Etienne and for miners, but then unfortunately, after they ran out of money and they were pretty much starving, people were of course just going crazy, and because of this, some unfortunate events were happening. So one of those were when Chaval, who used to work together with Maheu and Etienne in Vorey mine, he moved to another place. He kind of stole Catherine, and first Etienne was super jealous, but then he let it go, because if that's what she wanted, that's fine. Quite a progressive thought, right? While Chaval, he was beating her up all the time. He was saying he loves her, but he pretty much was really humiliating her every minute, so that was quite dreadful to read. But then Chaval was also the one who said that their mine was also joining the protests, but he ended up betraying Etienne, betraying the whole idea of the protests, and he even won a higher compensation for betraying and leading some other miners to do the same. And that's what's really he was working Denelaine's mine, who was owner of just one mine in the whole region, and the company really wanted to get it. So what happened is that when it was known that Chaval decided to betray everyone, Etienne, together with other really angry miners, went there and pretty much they destroyed the mine. So Denelaine's life was destroyed in this sort of sense as well, and they were also pretty much really unhappy with how Chaval behaved in this sense. And after this, he was of course an outlaw of, he was the outcast of the whole miners crew after this, of course. So Denelaine was made to sell his mine after all, and angry miners, after doing all of this to Jean Barter, the mine of Denelaine, they went back to Monsieur and Beau. They went back to Monsieur and Beau mansion, who is the director of the mine, and they were again really angry, and they were protesting, saying like, hey, you should all start paying us normally and not just try to steal more and more from us. So because of this, Migrah, who was he wasn't rapist, but he was using his position in order to have sex with women in exchange of bread, which is a crazy idea to think about it. He was so scared that people are actually not coming to talk with Monsieur Rimbaud, but in order to rob his shop, because this was the only place in the whole village where there were still a lot of supplies of food. He was so scared, and he died because of his greed after he was jumping from roof to roof because there were so many people, and he was scared to go through the crowd, of course. So after jumping from roof, he basically fell and broke his neck and died. He damaged his head and died. So all the women whom he ever used, they took off his penis and put it on the high stick and were walking around the village with it as a flag. That was quite a memorable moment of the book. So that was the way they decided to repay him for whatever he's done all these years for them, for their daughters. Yeah. So that was a payback. In the end, actually, they didn't steal anything from him, which was quite an interesting idea. So after the revenge was met, there was no need to do further vengeance. So of course the whole protest was going on, and more people started to doubt whether that's all should be happening and whether Etienne was right about starting all of this. Yeah, people were going much more skeptic, and some of them were already, even though it was all damaging the mine company a lot, they were still not really willing to compromise, because they were still feeling that they were still in a powerful position. So seeing that the protest is not really going to end, some army forces were brought in and they were protecting the mines, so nothing would happen again to the same as happened to the mine of Jean Barter, so they wouldn't destroy them. Soldiers were defending the mines once, and there was a moment when people were again angry and they went back to the Warray mine, and they started to again protest and fight, and they were screaming at soldiers, why they are here, are they gonna kill every one of them, what is the point, shouldn't they join the movement because they are the same people of the same class as they are. On which the young officer who was in charge of the squad, he wasn't able to really call for the more troops in order to remove the crowd around, because there were more and more hungry, starving miners who already were having quite psychological problems in this sort of sense. They were keep on pushing, and then the officer decided to scare them off by shooting at the front line of the people. This is how some kids died. Maheu died as well, the father. So some of the other characters who were there throughout the book also were dead, but they were of course secondary ones. So the main ones were still there. And yeah, after the shooting, the company announced that they are like not angry at the people, and they are asking them to join to get back to the mine. And some more people were already willing to do this, just because it was so hard after months of starving and trying to really survive. Those who had like smaller kids, they really tried to not to go, but some of them at the end were seduced by the offer of the company, who wasn't like that better at before. So they decided to go to the mine. So Catherine, who at that time already left Chaval, and they were sort of finally opening up about their feelings with Etienne, they together decided to go to the mine, just because Catherine thought it was important for her to earn some money in order to feed her family, who was starving after Maheu, Zachary, her brother. Zachary, her brother, left. Maheu died, so it was really complicated. So they all joined the group of miners who were going down the rails to the mine, and there was Chaval there as well. So due to this, yeah, because the mine wasn't in use and wasn't really working on time, it was really dangerous as it turned out to be. And yeah, basically the only way out was there was an accident and they couldn't really escape from the mine anymore, so they were underneath the earth. And yeah, some more people started to die off, and of course there was the saving expedition from above the earth with Negrel, the nephew of Monsieur and Bone, trying to lead this whole operation. But yeah, after the days of starving and trying to survive down below, Catherine and Etienne, and first there were three of them, Catherine, Etienne, and Chaval, but then Etienne killed Chaval. They were trying to survive, but of course after the, I think it was over the week, they were just sitting there, and of course they had water, so some people already were drowning in there, and they pretty much were the only one who left alive. So they've been waiting for other miners to find them, and they were of course like knocking on the wall in order to signalize that they are here. But unfortunately, Catherine didn't make it just yet, so she was having really terrible times, and unfortunately she passed away, I think half a day or a day before they got saved. So Etienne was the only one who survived the whole accident. And after all of this, he pretty much stopped working on the mine, and he decided to join Pluchart in Paris to continue working on politics. Basically, the whole book pretty much showing how, at the end of the day, small people like those miners, they weren't really able to beat the system and win the system. And even if this seemingly more fairer movement for the workers' rights were arising, they were nowhere near in terms of resources and ability to overtake the owners and try to make fairer conditions. And you know, it was like people weren't really trying to... There was no real dialogue between the rioters and between the company, because company felt in a really powerful position not to compromise with miners, because it was them still living on some monetary resources, while miners were just, they were just angry and hungry people starving out there with no real other hope, rather than that their deeds will allow them to get what they wanted, which unfortunately in the end didn't happen. And of course there were some questions of Stuart was still pointing out to at the end that maybe they should start the actual fights, find weapons, and actually do the riot. The riot will turn into the revolution or something like this. But then there was Rasner, who was totally, of course, against that, and he was even against the whole idea of starting the protest just because there are not enough resources, as he warned Etienne. Etienne stuck somewhere in the middle. He still started this whole thing, and unfortunately it didn't work out. I kind of was rooting for them, because it was such a beautifully written story, really dense text, really dense descriptions about everything, so it was probably a bit harder to read. But I really enjoyed the language in the book. I enjoyed the story, and the ending is quite unfortunate. It's a really logical but unfortunate ending that, it's really hard to beat the system. It's really hard to beat the powerful ones of this world. No matter how many of you out there, if they have money and resources, they probably gonna beat you. So it's not a fairy tale, for sure not. It's a really tragic story. But it's a really beautiful one. I think this is it from me from Germinal, so I hope you guys like that, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on what you think about the book. So please leave them down in the comments, and subscribe to the channel, give a like, and I'll see you next time.